The next piece I'm going to talk about is stop, think, and act. This one I have personally tried, and it works really well. You would use this stop, think, and act when someone is very impulsive and always gets into trouble for either saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, okay? How this works is basically you got to train the student to imagine 3 circles. The first circle is the stop circle, and I'm imagining mine right now. I step into my stop circle before I become a social deviant, or before I become disruptive. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stop myself in the circle by not acting and proceeding to do the inappropriate act. I'm stopping myself right now. The second piece is I step into my next circle, which is right there, and I step into it. Oh yes, I think. And while I'm in this circle, I actually start to rationalize the logic behind what I'm intending to do. There's that word, my intention. I've not done or committed the act yet. That's my intention, okay? Then I step into the third circle, and this is my act circle. This is when I have internalized, and I've had what I call an internal dialogue. A dialogue where I've rationalized my intention to a point where I realize the appropriate way to act or the path to take is not this, but that, and I act appropriately. You all understand that? That's simple. So when you train your students, you can tell them, imagine the 3 circles, the stop circle, the think, and the act, okay? And I also like the other strategy that I use a lot. It's called the empty chair. The empty chair is, yes, exactly what it says. It says it's empty. Charlie, would you like to come down and let's practice the empty chair today? Charlie has an attention deficit disorder. He's been disruptive. He always gets into people's faces and people's stuff, and he actually sometimes he hits kids, and we just don't know what we can do without Charlie. But anyway, I'm going to talk to Charlie today, and we're going to use what is called the empty chair technique. The empty chair technique is basically, this is Charlie, and this is the person who always gets hit by Charlie, me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a name. I'm going to call myself Jack. Jack is a person Charlie is always victimized. Charlie wants you to know that Jack is, that's Jack's seat right there, okay? Now, what I would like you to do, Charlie, is I'd like you to go ahead and move into the seat of Jack, and I want you to sit down where Jack sits. Go ahead, do that now, Charlie. All right, Charlie, I have a question for you. How do you think, now that you are Jack, how do you think Jack feels about you hurling abuse verbally or hitting out at him during lunch and at school? How does that feel to you? How do you think Jack would feel now that you're in his chair?
I would be scared.
Okay.
Because I thought I was going to be hit, and it wouldn't be a good thing.
Wouldn't be a good...
You know, it'd be a very bad thing.
Charlie, do you have a choice to deal with your behavior?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Everybody give Charlie a hat clap. Good job. That's called the empty chair technique. It's sort of an offshoot for the 3 circles, getting them to the empty chair and having them empathize. We're developing empathy skills here. Empathy skills, all right? The next piece is, one of my favorites, called the high P request, high probability request. It follows what is called a rule of 3, and it works on the premise that students are more likely to obey teacher directives if they are already actively engaged in a compliant classroom behavior. What that simply means is that if we take 2, write this down, 2 non-contingent tasks, and you pair it with 1 contingent task, the outcome is going to be a follow-through with that activity. Now, when do we use a high P request, otherwise known as the high probability request? We would use the high probability request. Here you have Tamika, a student that comes into classroom, always disorganized, always late, does not know where to find her backpack, does not know where to find her file folders, and when she gets on task, she never gets to complete her work. And she actually refuses most of the time because she just don't find any interest in doing work. How many of you had students like this or know students like that, Tamika? Obviously out there, I'm sure you found a Tamika out. But here's how high P request would work, okay? A high P request would work something like this. You deliver 2 non-contingents to 1 contingent. The non-contingents are not contingent upon the task. For example, you are teaching math, and you want Tamika to complete a 20-word math problem. And we know that Tamika is not going to do it. So Tamika comes through the door. Hello, Tamika. Good morning. How are you today? Good to see you. Tamika, would you take this paper, and I want you to go ahead and pass out the papers. Tamika goes, grabs the paper. That's contingent, non-contingency activity number 1. Pass, pass, pass. Okay, Tamika, thank you very much. Now, Tamika, I'd like you to go and sit in your chair and get ready for work. That's non-contingent activity directive number 2. Tamika sits down. Now, Tamika, I want you to begin work promptly and go ahead and get started. So that is the contingent task. The contingent task is the task upon which you want Tamika to become proficient at. So again, what is the high P request? The high P request requires what? 2 non-contingent followed by a 1 contingent. And what's the time period between the non-contingent and the contingent? It must be within 5 seconds. Write that down. 5 seconds. There is a reasoning behind the high P request that if we do 2 non-contingents, we wait 5 seconds, and we go beyond the 5 seconds, we might lose the momentum of what's happening. Because Tamika, she's had success with the first non-contingent, correct? I asked her to give out the papers. The second directive was, Tamika, go ahead and have a seat and sit down in the chair. That's the second non-contingent. She did, and she followed through. So we got a pattern. The third contingent is what you want Tamika to do. And then she gets to doing it. And the rule of thumb is no more than 5 seconds between 2 non-contingents and a contingent. Any questions on that? And you can read more about that. How much you like that? Good, thank you. Middle East, West Tennessee, do you all have any questions at this point? I'll be taking in questions from you. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. The next strategy I'd like you to consider in your classroom, they have found through research, there's so much of research in this area that we don't give too much of attention to, that regularly held whole class meetings have a very positive effect on improving behavior of students. These are, some like to call them huddles. Have you heard of huddles? Some like to call them morning meetings. Some principal I know actually schedule class meetings at the middle school level for about 20 minutes for students to just come together. It's a time for bonding. It's a time for creating a sense of community. And 3 things that it should focus on is, one is getting students to understand how to deal with problem-solving skills, developing what I call social emotional intelligence. Okay? If you want a great book on social emotional intelligence, read the book by Daniel Goleman. Also, teaching them pro-social skills. Also, teaching them how to negotiate and be assertive. And or every morning you could have a 5-minute morning meeting. And this type of strategy really sets the tone and the climate for your class. I'm going to spend some time just talking to you about behavior right now, talking about a behavior cycle, and I call it understanding the anatomy of a behavior cycle. And here you have behavior on one side, and you have behavior taking place on a low to high scale, going across time. The basic model is that behavior is contingent upon the environment. We know that behavior is also learned, and we have to have something called a trigger to actually cause the escalation of the behavior. And as you can tell, that in the environment, it could be triggered by another student. It could be triggered by the teacher. It could be triggered internally for no reason as well. And then you get a quick acceleration, and we get to a peak, a point in which where the student is very, very upset, very angry, and I call it their boiling point, actually. And then eventually they will de-escalate, and it comes down, and eventually it gets to the recovery phase. That is just one unit of a behavior. In PBS, what we're trying to do is that we are trying, between the calm and the trigger phase, is to set up our environment so that we do not have any type of escalation or probability of such escalations. So that's what we're trying to do in our schools, is to put the primary prevention, the tertiary prevention, and the secondary prevention right between the calm and the trigger phase so that we do not allow those peaks to happen. Do you know someone like this? That's one. Come on now. I'm getting a little tired of this. Why can't you do one little thing for me? Look at me when I'm talking to you, young man. Okay, that's two. Hello, hello. Is anybody home? Earth to David. One more and you are out of here. Do you hear me, young man? This is it. I have had enough of you. Your friend Tony never behaves this way. Okay, that's enough. That's 3. Take 10, go to timeout right now, get out of my sight, and stay away from my desk. Does that happen, folks? Can that happen? Yeah. Do we have people out there doing that? Yeah. Let me tell you what's wrong with that. 2 very important points. The 2 biggest problems that you could do in behavior management is that too much talking and too much of emotion. And that was an example of too much of talking and too much of emotion. And my next slide is, I like to call this the world's 2 silliest questions coming up. Number 1, who started it? Number 2, what happened? Yeah, it is the world's 2 silliest, craziest questions. I mean, it did happen. Somebody did start it, but you're not really being proactive here, okay? So let's not ask those questions. Here's what happens when we do talk too much. Really, this is what you are doing. When you are the word describing this strategy is called begging. You are actually begging when you talk too much, when you show too much of emotion. And what is this begging I'm talking about? When you beg, number 1, you are, in effect, thinking for the child. Write that down. Underline it. You are thinking for the child. And number 2 is taking responsibility for his behavior. You are taking the responsibility for his behavior. What's happening here, folks? Everything becomes externally controlled, whereas the student in question should start to take ownership of the problem and start to feel more empowered, and we've not giving them the opportunity to self-reflect, self-analyze, and try to regulate their own behavior. But we take it on through our emotion and through too much of talking. And please don't ask those 2 silliest questions, and I know you won't.